Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Jack of All Trades. I'm your host, Jack Allen, and today we are at St. Anthony's Chapel in Troy Hill, where we have the second largest collection of relics in the world. And I want to thank Andy Amrine here because, with his connections in the diocese, is the reason we're here, because it's not a very easy thing to do. So I want to thank you for helping us out to do this show.
Jack, it's my pleasure. Anything for you and BPTV and all our friends and family in Bethel Park. But I think this will be just an amazing show, seeing what St. Anthony's has. It's breathtaking.
Yeah.
So I'm very, very excited to be able to facilitate to get the cameras in here to take a look around.
If you can just tell us a little bit about the building we're in now before we go over to the chapel.
Sure. This is the Father Supert Mollinger Museum. Father Mollinger was the priest who built the chapel and who created the collection of relics that are found in the chapel. And this museum has some artifacts from his life as well as his time here. For instance, we have crutches and things of people who had miraculous healings while visiting the chapel, and then other things dedicated to St. Anthony, who's the patron of the chapel, and other things from Father Mollinger's time. And it's just a way to share what life was like then and a little bit about his life. He was a priest. He had studied medicine and was able to have a health clinic for people. And so this is a place where we're just able to show sort of the uniqueness of his life in this place, and how people have come here for now over a century to be able to share in the faith of the relics and just the beauty of this place.
Okay, and what was the time frame that he built this when he came over here?
Sure. So the first part of the chapel that we will see was built in the 1880s, dedicated in 1883. And then the second part of the chapel was built in 1892. And he died 2 days after it was dedicated in June of 1892. So he was here in the late 1800s, creating as the pastor of the parish on Troy Hill, but also to create this collection of relics as a way to preserve them.
Okay. Yeah, if you can just point out a few of the relics that you have over here.
Sure. In here, I think one of the best things to showcase are some of the crutches and other things that people laid down because of their healing. Now, one of the questions is, because Father Mollinger had a clinic, people may have had access to medicine that they otherwise wouldn't
Right.
have had. And so it's hard to say, were the healings miraculous because of the faith and the relics, or was it because of medicine, but nonetheless a place of healing and people being able to be healed and also restored in faith. We also have a few relics over here just to show how relics are authenticated. There's always paperwork that goes with them to say these really are what we say they are. And then just other devotional items. Of course, St. Anthony was a big part of Father Mollinger's life and devotion. And so things that he would have had as shrines and other devotional items for people to pray. But for this place is just a way to really just share about his life in a unique way, because he was so unique in providing for us this place.
Okay, like you said, the relics have to be verified.
Correct.
And is that done in the Vatican?
It is. When a relic is shared, whether with a church for veneration, there's always paperwork that goes with it to
Sure.
say, to trace its history and lineage. At times, the paperwork can get lost. For instance, a number of the paperwork and the relics here were lost in a fire many, many years ago. But they can be traced also by a wax seal that's on the back of the relic. And paperwork can be reproduced in case it's lost. So there are many ways to trace the lineage of a relic to make sure it's authentic, that this is a piece of the saint's body or something that they owned or wore. We're pretty certain that it is what it is.
Okay.
Father Mollinger, I think, became quite well known in the Pittsburgh area during his time here as he built the chapel, but also because he had some training in medicine. Some people say that faith and science are incompatible, but I think he really showed that modern medicine as it was developing and was able to really help people in their ailments, but also then to add that connection of faith and praying through the saints, because saints oftentimes we have different devotions for different things. Saints who we call upon for help with mental illness or with cancer or things like that. But then also we trust in medicine that God has allowed that to develop, and very, very smart people to be able to give us new medicines and healings. And I think Father Mollinger was a part of that. In fact, there were medicines that he had his face on them to help with different ailments, and that would be sold throughout the city here. And we have some of those artifacts here themselves. So he really became known as sort of this Renaissance man, right? Having an interest and a knowledge of a lot of things. And as you can see from some of the pictures in here from his time, just the number of people that would flock to the chapel. Again, whether it was to seek that medical assistance, and then certainly for faith, many pictures here of different processions and things that would happen all throughout Troy Hill. So he really was just someone who really shared the gifts that he had, because he built this all himself. He built the chapel himself. He was sort of independently wealthy, coming from the Netherlands, and in the end died a pauper because he spent everything to create these gifts for people. So sort of a fascinating character, and really someone that we are grateful that he did build all of this, because we get to enjoy it today.
Well, we're now inside of St. Anthony's, the chapel, and Father Nick will explain a little bit about how it was built, how it was actually came to be St. Anthony's. But you're looking at the relics on the back wall, and if you can go over just about the history of the chapel itself and what we'll be looking at.
Sure. So the chapel was built in two parts, and the part that we're looking at now is the original part of the chapel, the relic chapel, which was built in 1883. Father Mollinger, who we spoke of over in the museum, was the priest here, and he built this as his private chapel to house relics that he was receiving from people in Europe at the time. There was sort of a movement in Europe. People really didn't care about the relics, but the reliquaries, the relic holders, are usually made of a precious metal. They might have some jewels on them, and so people wanted to take those reliquaries and get whatever they could for them and put the relics aside. So Father Mollinger had a network of people in Europe who would safeguard the relics for him, send them to him, and as his collection started to grow, he needed a place to put them. And so he built this chapel. Again, he was sort of independently wealthy from his family, and so was able to build this all on his own. And very quickly, as the collection grew, he realized that he couldn't keep this for himself, and so opened the chapel to people who would come to visit, who might come to visit his medical clinic and seek spiritual healing through the intercession of the saints. And so over the course of those years, he ended up with a collection of over 5,000 relics of saints. Doesn't necessarily mean that there are 5,000 different saints. We might have multiple relics of one saint. But then just built the chapel, built the casing to house them all. Some of the reliquaries there he had created in order to house the relics that he was receiving, and other reliquaries are original. They were safeguarded entirely. So that's how this collection came to be. The chapel is open every day but Friday from noon until 3 o'clock, and you can just show up. On Saturday and Sunday, there are tours at 1 o'clock, a guided tour lasting about 45 minutes, explaining some of the relics and the history here. And then there's also Mass here most mornings during the week, 8:30, except for Wednesday, and on Sunday at 11:30. So people can come and worship here, or they can come and visit and get to experience the beauty of this place for themselves.
And do you still get new relics? Or?
We do. We try. Again, since they can't send them in the mail,
right.
We'd have to go retrieve them. But there is a young man who was recently beatified. His name is Blessed Carlo Acutis. He was a video gamer. He, was studying computers, and a great example for young people. And so we are in the process of working to get one of his relics from Italy. Whether we would have to go and get it, or we
Right.
could, make arrangements for someone to bring it back who was going over there. But that's certainly one that we would like to retrieve, and try our best to do what we can. But for the most part, the collection is mostly static.
Okay. And who would be in charge of doing that? I mean, is there one specific person in a diocese that would try to seek out relics, or is that something you would do?
Something that we would do here because of this place, and
Right.
people come to venerate the saints, and I think the example of more modern saints is important. These aren't just people from 1,000 years ago.
Right.
There are people today who are trying to live really good lives and share their gifts with others, and that we might consider them saints like the saints of old. So we really try to, if we can, maintain even more modern saints for people to come to get to know.
Okay. Maybe we can take a look at some of the unique relics that you have here.
Definitely.
All right, we're standing in front of the statue of St. Anthony. If you can just tell us a little bit about St. Anthony and how this church or chapel became St. Anthony's Chapel.
So Father Mollinger built the chapel in St. Anthony's honor. He had a great devotion to him. Of course, St. Anthony's probably among the better known saints, particularly when we lose something, our keys, and we say a quick prayer to St. Anthony to find them. And so Father Mollinger always had a great devotion to him, and so wanted to dedicate this chapel in his honor. So we have the statue of St. Anthony here, and beneath it, one of the more precious relics in the chapel is one of St. Anthony's molars. And what's very interesting about this is a number of years ago, some of the other relics of St. Anthony were traveling around the United States, and they came here. And the people who were from St. Anthony's Shrine, where he's buried in Italy, saw this relic and were amazed because there are only 2 teeth that are not in St. Anthony's tomb in Padua. They knew where one of them was, and they didn't know where the other one was, and they found it here.
Now they do.
And so just a very important relic for us, and since he is the patron of this chapel, we have devotions to St. Anthony every week here at the chapel on Tuesdays in the morning after Mass and in the evening, and he just again continues to look out to help those when things are lost, or even when people are lost, and we pray for our loved ones who maybe are looking to find their way, and so this becomes a great place of prayer for that. Every relic in the chapel is cataloged, and then when you look at individual relics, there's always a little piece of paper that explains who the relic is of. Sometimes they're easier to read than others. But here we have some collections of relics, but particularly in the center, sort of the largest reliquary here is a relic of the cross on which Jesus died. And we have a number of those relics here in the chapel, but this one is presented sort of in the most outstanding way. And then around it you see different things, sort of larger pieces of bones of saints over here. The statue at the bottom, St. Maurus, is not a relic, but it's just a statue of him. He was a martyr. He was a Roman soldier who died for the faith. And then around just a number of other saints and things like that. But essentially throughout the chapel, the relics may be presented in different ways, but for the most part, there's just a small piece of a saint's bone or hair, maybe a piece of clothing or something that they owned.
Now you mentioned this was the cross. Is there a piece of the cross in here, or?
There is, right in the center of the reliquary. There would be, where the cross comes together, there's a sliver of wood from the cross. So this reliquary contains the relics of over 700 saints. And actually the parchment beneath it lists all of the saints who are in that reliquary. So this is the authentication papers for this reliquary. Many ancient saints in here. And this case became the model for the design of the main relic case in the chapel that Father Mollinger built. Its style, its design. The relics of the 12 apostles are in here. Many other well-known saints and some that aren't so well-known. But this was a reliquary that was retrieved whole and entire and safeguarded here by Father Mullinger as a way, again, to preserve them. It's important for us to venerate the relics of saints. There's no power in the relic itself. Again, the relic can be a piece of bone or hair or something that the saint owned. But it's that idea of being near to them.
Right.
What do we do when we go visit our loved ones in the cemetery? That physical nearness reminds us that there's a nearness that even though they're no longer with us, that we still maintain some connection in love and in goodness. And so the same thing here. Being near the saints, calling upon their help, hopefully will allow us to live a little bit like them in faith and in hope and in love. And so that's how this practice started, really just that idea of physical nearness begets a spiritual closeness and that connection in prayer. And so to say, okay, 700 saints here, and to be surrounded by that help that we might call upon them, that it means a lot for people who come here, again, whether they seek healing or strength or they're just intrigued by this. On the top shelf of this case, right in the center, there's a reliquary that has a crown with some jewels in it, and within that reliquary is a thorn from the crown of thorns. The crown itself is in Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, and it was safeguarded during the fire a few years ago. But the thorns themselves are actually in churches throughout the world, and we're lucky enough to have one of them here. It's hard to see because of the light and the glare on the case, but it is in there, just that sliver of wood that was on Christ's head during his passion. And again, is counted among a number of unique relics that are over here. These reliquaries were safeguarded whole. So the cases that these relics are in date back a few hundred years. And again, display relics of saints and other things that are important to our faith. And they're part of our collection here, which is really the largest collection of relics that you can see in one place anywhere in the world. The Vatican would have more relics. They have the relic of every saint probably. But you can't see them all in one place. And so when you come here and you see this display and you see all the relics presented before you, you won't see that anywhere else.
Father, if you could explain what's unique about this section?
So again, there are many unique reliquaries here. Many of them don't match, which means they're original. But there's a large urn in the center of this case here. A number of years ago, back in the 70s and 80s, when they were cataloging all of the relics, they would take them out, they would clean them, make sure the names on them matched. And no one ever knew what was in this urn. And so they took it out and they were expecting to find, maybe a large number of remains of a saint, see what was written on it. And they took it out, there was no marking, and they opened up the urn and there was a raffle ticket inside. They think that Father Mullinger bought the urn intending to put the relic of an important saint in there and just never got the opportunity to do that. And so it was sort of like a time capsule, a raffle ticket from the past. But again, just in the midst of all of this, just to, again, recognize our connections to time past and even the history of Father Mullinger is important to us here because it becomes part of Pittsburgh, part of our own history. This is such a unique treasure right here. And so maybe our winnings from that raffle ticket are this chapel. So
Yeah, you did win, actually.
exactly, we definitely won.
Okay, we're now in front of the main altar. And if you could just point out a few things we're looking at here, Father.
We here, right around the main altar of the chapel, we have an entire skeleton of a saint. This is Saint Demetrius, who was a martyr. And then on either side, you see two skulls. We're getting into October and Halloween, so a little appropriate for that. But that venerating the entire body of a saint is sort of unique. You don't see that too much, and so they are safeguarded here. And again, they're intriguing for people to see a skull and things like that. But the reminder of people who have lived good lives and some of them who have given their life for the faith, and so we remember them here.
Okay, here we have probably one of the most unique relics that you have in the chapel. Can you tell us what we're looking at?
So this is a reliquary that Father Mullinger had made for veneration by the faithful, that they could touch and encounter the relics of the saints. In the center, there's a sliver of the cross. As we talked about, there are a number of those in the chapel, but here, to have it so close, there's a relic of St. Anthony in here, a number of other saints, St. John the Baptist, St. Mary Magdalene, that are well known to us, and some other saints who may not be so well known, but are important patrons for youth, for different diseases and things like that. And so Father Mullinger would have this reliquary available for people to come and venerate, to kiss or to touch, and pray for healing and strength. And just the design and the ornateness of it, it's worth going to great lengths to display these things because there's nothing too good for God.
So this one would be on display certain days of the year, or?
So we, every time we have devotions to St. Anthony, we use this. In different other times of the year, it's available for people to come and to venerate. And then there are also times throughout the year where we have saints like St. Peregrine, who's the patron saint of cancer, and others, for the people who may be suffering from different illnesses, can come and seek their intercession as well.
Well, with over 3,000 saints with relics in the chapel, people in Bethel Park, we have quite a few churches, St. Gabriel's, St. Valentine's, St. Thomas More. How would they actually find a relic that's down here? How do you categorize it?
So we have a catalog of all of the relics of the saints in the chapel. And with that, you can look through it either by the name of the saint, so St. Valentine. We could look up for St. Valentine and see all of the occurrences of a relic of St. Valentine, or St. Gabriel, St. Thomas More, all of the saints there in Bethel, St. Joan of Arc. Or you can go to a case and it'll show you all of the relics in that case. Okay. So if you're standing before a particular case of relics in the chapel, I wonder who's in this case. You can go through and do that without having to try to read the little banner that is in there. And so that's a great way to come, because people may have particular devotions to saints because of the parish where they attend Mass, or right. For other reasons, and that way they can come to find where they are in the chapel and just find that connection, which is important.
Right, because with just looking at so many of them, you'd have no idea what you were looking at unless you had some type of guide to do it. So.
And we're working to digitize this guide, where you could come and type in the name of a saint and it would show you where in the chapel it is through a phone app. So that will help all the more in locating where the saint right. is, and maybe even pinpointing a little bit more exactly where it is in the chapel. So
Okay. With all the relics that you have here in the chapel, do you have any favorite ones?
For me, as a priest, my favorite things about the relics are related to the celebration of the Eucharist, which is very important for us as Catholics. First, just being surrounded by the relics when we come here to celebrate Mass is a reminder for us that the Eucharist unites us to heaven, and all of these saints we trust are there with God, and so we make that connection every time we come here to pray. But also there are two important relics. One is hard to see, it's right behind the tabernacle here, but it's all of the saints that are listed in the first Eucharistic prayer of the Mass. The apostles, Peter and Paul, Andrew, James, John, Thomas, some of the first popes, early martyrs, men and women. And so praying that prayer and knowing that those saints are right here with us is very meaningful to me. And then also in the table of the altar here is a relic of a piece of the table of the Last Supper, where Jesus would have celebrated the first Eucharist with his apostles. And so to have that connection, celebrating Mass here, is just, as a priest, a wonderful connection. And so that's extremely meaningful to me.
And I'm sure it's something that most priests would love to have.
Yes, it's great when priests come to visit and to celebrate Mass here and to let them know. I always show them that relic,
right.
And they're very, very moved by it.
Okay. We're now in the addition to the chapel. You had mentioned it was a few years after the original chapel was built. If you can just tell us a little bit about this addition, the reason that it was built, and what we're looking at.
The original chapel was completed in 1883, and Father Mullinger would take trips during that time and after to Europe to bring back relics and things like that. On his last trip in the late 1880s or early 1890s, he was in Munich in Germany, and he saw these life-size Stations of the Cross and purchased them for the chapel, and realizing he needed to add on to the chapel in order to house them. So they came back and added on this section of the chapel, and it was dedicated on the Feast of St. Anthony, June 13th in 1892, with the stations in their niches and things like that. Father Mollinger died 2 days later, June 15th in 1892. So he saw the chapel completed and everything dedicated, and then he went to God.
So his life work was done.
His life work was done, and it remains to this day nearly unchanged as a treasure for us to enjoy. And so you can see the beauty of these stations. They truly are life-size, and particularly during Lent, when people come to pray the Station of the Cross, they're very moved, and it's good that we were able to share this for that purpose as well. But it really just sort of makes this chapel perfect place of pilgrimage to come to learn about the saints,
Right.
to pray, and to spend some time in peace and in quiet.
In addition to the Stations of the Cross, you also have some unique stained glass windows.
The stained glass windows were made in Germany, and along the sides of the church, they depict the saints, and then the main stained glass window above the organ just is brilliant as the sun shines through it and brings a lot of light in, really just sort of a highlight, particularly as people are leaving the chapel, and they're drawn to see that.
Now, the stained glass windows that are there, are they're different saints, obviously. Were they picked just for that area, or was it just random saints?
Most of them are the apostles, and then just a few other random saints, but they are the depictions of the apostles.
And you also have in the balcony a unique pipe organ up there.
It's refurbished about 10 years ago. It was made locally in the Erie area originally, and so we have sometimes concerts here, and as well as just to accompany our prayer mass and things like that. So it's the whole package.
Yeah, well, Father Nick, we certainly appreciate you being on our show. I mean, it's intriguing. We not only broadcast locally, but we also have a lot of viewers on YouTube as our other TV station. So just give us a little recap of where it's located, because I really don't want them to call my office and say, where was that? So if you can just give us a recap of where we're at, the hours again for the museum and so on, that'd be terrific.
My pleasure, and thanks, Jack, and I'm happy to be able to share this with you and your viewers. The chapel is located on Troy Hill in Pittsburgh, 1700 Harpster Street. It's open every day for visits from noon until 3, except for Friday. We have Mass here Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday at 8:30 in the morning, and Sunday at 11:30 in the morning if people would want to worship with us. In Lent, we have Stations of the Cross with the life-size stations at 7 p.m. on Fridays and 3 p.m. on Sundays. We have a Lenten fish fry as well before the Friday stations if people want to come and make an evening of it. And we also, on the first Sunday of every month, we have sung evening prayer with the veneration of the relic of a particular saint whose feast day falls that month. The chapel shop and museum are open from 12 to 3 as well, when the chapel is open every day but Friday. And so it's just not too far away, cross a bridge or two and
Right.
get here, and just to come and enjoy it. Enjoy the neighborhood. It's a great historic neighborhood to walk around, and we're just grateful that we get to share it with you as we share it with all of our visitors who come here.
Well, we certainly appreciate it for you to letting us be here and giving us a tour of the chapel itself. And we look forward to coming back, and I'll certainly be here to spend more time looking at particular ones.
You're welcome
So,
anytime.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So good to be with you.